Welcome to MTG Friends. I'm Ryan, and we're going to be doing essential green cards for Commander EDH. Now, these are either going to be green cards that are auto-includes, serious considerations, or staples in Commander in green. Now, this doesn't mean they have to be in mono green only. This can be for multiple colors, dual, etc., etc. So let's jump in. We're going to do these in groups, and we're going to start with draw. And speaking of draw, the best green draw card ever created is Sylvan Library. It is a 2-drop enchantment. You may draw 2 extra cards during your draw phase, then either put 2 of the cards drawn this turn back on top of your library in any order, or lose 4 lives per card not replaced. Effects that prevent or redirect damage may not be used to counter this loss of life. So it's got some real old school text because it is a real old school card. It is, dare I say, an auto include in any mono green build for sure, and a serious consideration if you're running it with, say, black or blue, or ways that you can be drawing additional cards. So definitely add this into any green build you got. Moving on to the next card. Talking about essentials or serious considerations, we got Worldly Tutor, the best green tutor ever printed. It is search your library for a creature card and reveal that card to all players. Shuffle your library and put the revealed card back on top of it. So as you probably know, all the colors have pretty decent tutors. Minus red per se, but you know, this one is just fantastic. You can tutor up a creature, a utility creature that you need based off of what the battlefield's doing, or you can combo this up. The one downside is that it puts it on top of your library and not in your hand, but there is another card that does this swimmingly, and that is Survival of the Fittest. It is colorless green enchantment. You pay 1 green, choose and discard a green card, search your library for a creature card, reveal that card to all players, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your library afterwards. Now, what's amazing about this card is that it's an enchantment, so you can do this over and over again. It is an incredibly strong tutoring card. Survival of the Fittest. Now, auto include, not necessarily depending on your build, but definitely a serious consideration, and certainly is a staple in green. An essential card to be considering for every build you do. Speaking of an incredible card for tutoring up things / draw is Tooth and Nail. Now, it is going to cost you 7 to get this onto the playfield as a sorcery, but it's choose one. Search your library for up to 2 creature cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library or put up to 2 creature cards from your hand into play. And you add another 2 mana to that thing, and you get to do both of those. Oh, what an incredible card. Dare I say, the bottom of it should say, hey, you play this card with Entwine, you're probably gonna win. You can combo this thing up with all sorts of things, or you can just smack down onto the playfield. Incredibly powerful, tutored up creatures that you can combo up and just smack down your opponents. Ooh-wee, Tooth and Nail, serious consideration in any green build. All right, next up is Oracle of Muldiah. It is definitely most efficient and probably an auto-include in any green build for sure. And oh, it's also an elf, so anybody who's doing elf tribal, definitely put this thing in there. Oracle of Muldiah is a 4-drop 2/2. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library if it's a land card. So it's going to help you get through your deck. If you are top decking a land, you get to play it. Just be careful, of course, to not play one out of your hand so that you can't play it off the top deck and keep sifting through your deck. Now, a lesser card of Oracle of Muldiah, but still powerful and a serious consideration and certainly a staple, just like Oracle is Courser of Kruphix. Now, this does something very similar, not quite as efficiently because you can't drop multiple lands, but is play with the top card of your library revealed, and you may play the top card of your library if it's a land card. So just like Oracle. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So just, a little extra bonus. So between those 2 cards, you're going to want to play one of those in your build in green. Oh, just a fabulous, fabulous card, just like Courser as well. But Oracle definitely wins out because you can play more than 1 land. All right, speaking of drawing, we have a couple other staples. We have Beast Whisperer, which is a 4-drop, 2/3. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Now, I'm not going to say this is an auto-include because it's definitely not an auto-include at a 4-drop, but it's a serious consideration because of its just pure draw mechanics. It's a great card. I run this in a lot of my green decks. Speaking of green decks that I put this in almost every single one of them is Return of the Wild Speaker. It is a 5-drop instant. Instant is key. Such a great instant spell. Choose one, draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. So it's got some versatility in it, but most importantly, it's got that draw mechanic. Now, of course, if you're running a humans deck or something, you're going to not want to run this, but you are in green, so most likely you're running other things and you're probably running beefy creatures. So if you're running more than mono green, then you'll have to think about whether this one fits into whatever you're building. But a serious consideration. You're going to hear me say that a lot in this episode. Serious consideration. Is it a consideration? Why, yes. Why, yes, it is. I cracked myself up. All right, another staple. Oh, just an absolutely incredible card for fetching things out of your graveyard is Eternal Witness. It only costs you 3. It's a 2/1 human shaman. When Eternal Witness comes into play, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Notice it says card and not creature. This makes it so powerful to go grab something that you need out of your graveyard and just start filling your hand up again. Just an incredibly powerful card that is a consideration for every green deck you build. Genesis Wave, X green, green, green. This is definitely going to go fetch you something grand. It's reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield into your graveyard. I can honestly say that this is probably in 90% of all of the builds that myself and my colleagues in green do. Oh, it's just an incredibly powerful card. Genesis Wave is certainly something you want to include in green. Now, similar to this is Chord of Calling and Finale of Devastation and Green Sun's Zenith. Let's go through these. They're in the same ilk. Chord of Calling has Convoke, which is definitely going to be worthy of putting in if you're running tokens or you're running lots of creatures. It's search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less and put it into the play. Then shuffle your library. Finale of Devastation is also similar with some extra beef and buffing. Search your library and or graveyard for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X and gain haste until end of turn. So like I said, it's in the same ilk, just does some slightly different things. So it's certainly worthy of your attention, absolutely. And Green Sun's Zenith, which is just like those other ones, is search your library for a green creature card with converted cost X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Shuffle Green Sun's Zenith into the owner's library. So what's nice about this one is you get to reuse it in your deck if you pull it up out of the library again. And then finally in our essentials list for draw and the tutors is Fierce Empath. It's kind of an honorable mention, but it's definitely worth thinking about. It's a 3-drop 1/1. When Fierce Empath enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost 6 or greater, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Now, I'm not going to say this is an essential card for every green deck you build. It's just something you should be aware of. Make sure you know it's there, especially if you're playing really large creatures in a creature build. Then that will be something you want to consider. Now, let's go into ramp. And before we go into ramp, please consider hitting subscribe if you're new to the channel. Make sure you hit that like button. It is very helpful. And also hit that alert button if you want to make sure that you don't miss any of our content. We upload content regularly. Moving on. All right. Now, ramp. We have some mana dorks that are just auto includes. Definitely at least some of these. We got Birds of Paradise, Elvish Mystic, Fyndhorn Elves, and Llanowar Elves. Oh man, are these just essential in green. Birds of Paradise, you probably don't think about this all the time, but not only does it add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, but it's a flyer, so it's a great blocker. Not only do you have it to get the mana ramp that you need, but you can use it to keep from getting smacked in the face by something that you weren't aware of was going to be smacking you in the face. Yeah, alright, I digress. It's a blocker, mana dork. There you go, flyer. Yes, okay, moving on. Elvish Mystic, just a great mana dork. You tap it for green, it only costs you 1. And in the same ilk, you got Llanowar Elves doing the same thing, and Fyndhorn Elves as well. Now, if you're not in mono green, you're going to have a couple other options like this. But we didn't put it on the list because we are talking about essential green cards. All right. Now, talking about your essentials for mana ramp, because green does this so swimmingly. We got, of course, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Farseek, Rampant Growth, and Sky Shroud Claim. Well, so let's start with top one. We got Cultivate, which, you know, depending on your build, you're probably most certainly going to be running this in green. It's search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, and put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle your library. Now, Kodama's Reach does the same thing. Super efficiently search your library for 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, and put 1 into play tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle your library. So you got those 2 in your arsenal. But wait, there's more, because we got Farseek, which is 2 mana instead of 3, but it's more specific because you can fetch up a plains, island, swamp, and mountain, or mountain. So this is a little different, and it only searches you up 1 card. Now, Rampant Growth is similar, where it's a 2-drop that you search for a basic land. But let's say we don't want a basic land. That's when Sky Shroud Claim comes into effect. It's 4-drop, search your library for up to 2 forest cards and put them into play. Notice it says into play, which means they come in untapped. Plus it says forest, which means it's not a basic land forest. It can be any forest, like a shock forest land or others. So that's pretty fantastic. Now let's get into some serious, crazy, ridiculous mana ramp, which is, of course, the original gangster Gaia's Cradle. Oh man, this thing is gonna fetch a pretty penny if you don't have one, but it is, dare I say, an auto include in any mono green, absolutely. And if you're doing multiple colors, it's a consideration. Now, it's add green to your mana pool for each creature you control, so the build needs to fit, so you would want to definitely be running creature heavy decks when you do this, but I could see other reasons to be doing this, especially if you're running something that's X in the cost, you know, pay X green, blue, whatever. But a serious contender for Gaia's Cradle, not quite as great, but still right up there, is because it flips to become a Gaia's Cradle is Growing Rites of Itlimoc. It costs you 3, and it's a legendary enchantment. When Growing Rites of Itlimoc enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Ooh, I like that. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform Growing Rites of Itlimoc. And then you have a Gaia's Cradle. Oh, lovely, lovely. Of course, it's not as efficient as Gaia's Cradle because Gaia's Cradle just comes in as a Gaia's Cradle. All right. So let's go into the removal segment for essential green cards for Commander EDH. So Frozen Grip hits the top of this category, and the reason I say it's the top of this category is because it has split second. So this thing kills combos. So not only can you use it to destroy target artifacts or enchantments, but if somebody is comboing off, you play this thing, it hits split second, which means no other spells or abilities can hit the stack until it resolves. So that truly and unequivocally kills off combos going off. And you're going to see some grumpy faces if they're enjoying their little combo they're doing. But more importantly, or as importantly, I suppose, is the fact that, hey, it also destroys target artifact or enchantment. So there you go. Sweet, sweet, sweet. Now, in the same ilk without split second is Force of Vigor. It is a 4-drop that if it's not your turn, you may exile a green card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Destroy up to 2 target artifacts or enchantments. So let's say you're all tapped out, they think everything's going groovy, and they are starting to think about, let's start using these artifacts and enchantments. You can just go, nope, ain't happening, smack down, I'm killing those. So great. So great. Wonderful, wonderful removal spell. Now, another one to consider, I definitely wouldn't say it's an auto-include. It can always be argued whether a card's an auto-include in a green build or not. Just always thinking about serious considerations. Well, this is one you want to consider, especially if you're not running a lot of enchantments. It's Back to Nature. Destroy all enchantments at instant speed for 2 mana. Yes, that's right, folks. For 2 mana. You can destroy everything on the board that's an enchantment for all your opponents. So, depending on the kind of build you're running, you definitely want to think about this card. Now, alright. Speaking of removal, we got Beast Within. Now, green has never been super strong about removal of creatures. Well, this is one way to do it. And it's also, for this one, it's a permanent. So Beast Within is destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. Well, a 3/3 beast, who cares? I mean, if you're getting a utility land out of the way, or a permanent that is just very sticky, or something that's gotten completely out of control, hit it with Beast Within, and you're good to go. All right, along the same sort of feel and flavor is Nature's Claim. It's for 1, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Its controller gains 4 life. Oh, we're in Commander, so we don't care about 4 life, do we? No, not really. Not really. Song of the Dryads. It's a 3-drop enchant permanent. Enchantment permanent is a colorless forest land. So this thing just loses everything, and it's just sitting there as a colorless forest land. Gotta love that. There's similar cards in other colors, or even colorless, dare I say. This one is for you green Commander players. Reclamation Sage. It's just a fabulous card if you want it to be comboed up with a creature. It's Reclamation Sage enters the battlefield. You may destroy target artifact or enchantment. Plus, it's an elf, and it only costs you 3. So, depending on what kind of build you're doing, this might replace or be put in addition to a couple of the others, like Force of Vigor or Frozen Grip. I highly, highly recommend putting Corrosion Grip in every single green build you got. You will be able to use it. You will be able to utilize it. All right, so now we have what I'm calling everything else. Now, I don't really mean everything else. Just a few more cards in the essential green cards for Commander consideration pool. Now, Craterhoof Behemoth. Oh, if you're running green and you're running big creatures, you're going to want to consider running this. Or if you're running stuff that makes your board go wide, this is a card for you. Craterhoof Behemoth. It's a 5 green, 5/5 creature beast with haste. When Craterhoof Behemoth enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get XX until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. Oh, so if your build is doing stuff with multiple creatures that have trample, or you're just doing tokens that are 1/1s, can you imagine having 10 token 1/1s out there? You drop Craterhoof Behemoth, everything just feeds off of itself, creating just gigantic creatures. I've done that before and it feels good. Craterhoof Behemoth, serious consideration if not auto include in your green deck build. The Great Henge. It is spendy, at least when you first take a look at it. This is right out of Eldraine. It's 7 green, legendary artifact. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And then the added couple bonuses of tap it to add 2 green, and then you get 2 life. And then on top of that, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. This has everything, people. I mean, holy shnikes. It buffs your creatures. It draws when you play creatures. It gains you life. And it ramps you. Oh, whoa. The best commander card out of Eldraine by far. It is, if not an auto-include, near auto-include in any green deck you build. Certainly mono green deck. So definitely for your consideration, the Great Henge. Now, Doubling Season, by far the jankiest, coolest, just token generator, doubling up 1/1 counters, just doing all sorts of crazy stuff for your board. It costs 5. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. If an effect would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many on those counters on that permanent instead. Now, it's definitely not an auto-include because it depends entirely on the kind of a deck you're building. But if you're building stuff with tokens and +1/+1 counters or effects that do either of those or both of those, you definitely want to have this as an auto-include. It is relatively expensive, but it's not going to set you back too bad. But you definitely want to put this in under those criteria. That's why it's in the everything else category and not the auto-include segment. Now, Heroic Intervention. This is definitely an auto-include in any green build you have. Heroic Intervention for 2. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. That's permanents. That means everything you got. So barring things getting exiled, this thing is going to protect you like Teferi's Protection, but just not quite as good because nothing as good as Teferi's Protection, where all of your permanents no longer exist. I mean, until the end of... I mean, come on. But in terms of green, Heroic Intervention, definitely auto-include this in every green build you got. Or even multiple colored green, black, green, blue, green, whatever, green, white. You put in Heroic Intervention and you put in Teferi Protection. For sure. In fact, that's what I do. If you check out our deck text, you'll notice that Heroic Intervention is in every single green build. All right, we got some honorable mentions because they're circumstantial or depend on what kind of deck you're building. All right, let's go. Life from the Loam. So this is very specific because it's return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand, and it's got Dredge 3. Now Dredge, this is kind of a funky mechanic. If you could draw a card, instead you may put exactly 3 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. If you do, return this this card from your graveyard to your hand, otherwise draw a card. So this is going to be fueling your graveyard if you're running reanimation decks. Life of a Loam is just fantastic for pulling stuff out, or if you're running it with Crucible of Worlds, or if you're running fetch lands. This thing is just so janky cool and great for those kinds of builds. And like I said, that's why it's in honorable mention. Life of a Loam is a consideration for those types of builds. Dare I say a step further, it's an auto include for those types of builds. All right, Ramanap Excavator. It's a 3/2/3 Nega Cleric. You may play land cards from your graveyard. So, you know, Life of a Loam, Ramanap, Crucible of Worlds, those are the kind of cards you're going to want to be auto-including in those kinds of decks. Noxious Revival. This, I wouldn't even say this is an honorable mention, but it's not necessarily an auto-include in every green deck, but it's certainly something you want to consider, especially if you want some hate going on in your opponent's graves. It costs you nothing because it's got Phyrexian, can be paid with either green or 2 life, and put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. So if you need to keep an opponent from playing something out of the graveyard, use Noxious Revival. But even as importantly, or if not more importantly, you can grab something out of your own graveyard and put it at the top of your library so that you can put it back in your hand and play it. This is a great card that, whether or not you were aware of it, just wanted to make sure it was on the list because it's definitely an essential in green under certain builds. Speaking of which, kind of specific, but maybe an auto include in the decks you build, is Crop Rotation. It only costs you 1 green, and at the time you play Crop Rotation, sacrifice a land. You can tell this is an old card by the way that's written, and search your library for a land card and put that land into play. Shuffle your library afterwards. So what an amazing card to go grab a utility land that you have in your deck that's either going to be comboing up something for you or is circumstantial to what the board play is going on. This is how you go grab any land in your deck. Similar to like Golos, where you can go grab any land that you want, although this only costs you 1 green and it's not a creature, and it's at instant speed. Notice it's at instant speed, which is incredible. Crop Rotation is in the honorable mentions because it's such a versatile, amazing card to go fetch you up a land that you need. Just amazing. Another honorable mention is Birthing Pod. Holy moly, is this thing powerful depending on what you're trying to do. It is 3 Phyrexian, which can be paid in life or green, and for 1 Phyrexian, tap, sacrifice creature, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, and that's why this is so powerful. Then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you cast a sorcery. So if you're playing sack decks where if you sack something, they have to sack something, or even better, if you're just trying to ramp up on the creatures you got coming into play, or they have entering the battlefield mechanics, Birthing Pod is just an amazing way to just start ramping up your creatures, using shenanigans and janky stuff to just make things go crazy with the deck that you're building. Now, it's kind of out of the scope of this particular episode, talking about all the different things that Birthing Pod does. However, if you've made it this far and you want me to do a segment on just Birthing Pod itself, put in the comments. I'd be happy to do that. And that is the list for essential green cards for Commander and EDH. Please hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button. Hit the alert button so you don't miss out on any of our other content. Check out our other episodes. Thanks for being a friend of the gathering. Make sure you put comments in the comment sections. Hey, is there a green card that you think should be on this list? Put it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If there's some in here that you think, very circumstantial, maybe not essential, maybe not auto-includes, notice I was very careful to not say auto-include in every single one of these, because that is definitely up to interpretation, and it's just these cards are the ones that we feel are incredibly powerful that you definitely want to consider in each of your green builds. All right, thanks for tuning in, and check us out at the other episodes.